Hello, and welcome back to my channel, where today we are continuing the Yokai series with a look at the different types of skeleton enemies in FromSoft games and the popular folklore behind some of them. Skeletons are, for obvious reasons, universally associated with death, although each culture loads them with their own subtly different connotations. Having said that, not all cultures have actually used skeletons to personify death. Many instead have gods who rule the underworld or have some other similar function. The now typical Grim Reaper figure is a European invention of the Middle Ages with roots in a mixture of sources. The Greek god Cronus and the Roman equivalent Saturn were both associated with time and also harvest. The scythes they bear are, of course, originally agricultural tools. They gave way to personifications of time, who, in turn, form the basis for the personification of death. The scythe remained as a metaphor for harvesting souls, although other allegorical depictions are not uncommon. Here, for instance, death is whimsically showing blowing bubbles to illustrate the fragility of life. In the Japanese tradition, skeletons are a type of onryo, that is, grudge spirits seeking revenge for a traumatic death and who did not receive the proper funeral rites, allowing their spirit to move on to the afterlife. Skeleton spirits usually result either from people dying in battles and being unceremoniously buried in mass graves, or more especially, people dying from starvation in the wilderness. For this reason, skeleton spirits have a particular association with hunger. Although, as I said, FromSoft use a variety of skeleton enemies, their most memorable are examples of the Gashadokuro, the giant hunch skeleton which is one of the best known and most popular yokai there is. Gashadokuro arise from the gathered bones of those who died of starvation in the wild or in battle. Owing to their terrible deaths, the Gashadokuro are filled with anger and bloodlust that can only be satisfied by drinking the blood of the living, usually by ripping their heads off first. They silently stalk the countryside at night and have a habit of appearing suddenly in all their noise and terror. The name Gashadokuro is onomatopoeic and comes from the so-called gacha gacha noise of rattling bones. Obviously, High Lord Wolnir from Dark Souls 3 is the best example that springs to mind. He is an absolutely archetypical Gashadokuro, a humongous hunching skeleton appearing out of nowhere and whose lore describes him as vengefully sentencing hundreds to gruesome deaths. Elden Ring also features a few Gashadokuro, here as field enemies summoned by the Tibia Mariners. The Tibia Mariners themselves have no particular precedence in Japanese mythology as far as I can tell, although ghost ships are a widespread theme in fantasy and horror. Nashandra is an instance of a more free treatment of conventional yokai tropes. Japanese apparitions often have the ability to disguise themselves or appear as ordinary people in order to lure or trick their victims. This is true for all types of creatures, demons and animal spirits. The moment of reveal is typical as a dramatic climax in Japanese folklore stories and in the traditional arts which depict them. In this kabuki dance, for example, a great serpent disguised as a lady, now intoxicated by sake, reveals its true form in the moonlight. The change of costume to a fabric with the diamond pattern represents snakeskin. Not all FromSoft skeletons are drawn from such a rich cultural heritage. The vast majority are simply ordinary skeletons that are the obvious choice of enemy for dungeon or catacomb locations. Even some bosses fit this description. They're either generic individuals like the Skeleton Lords, or a colourful mashup like Gravelord Nito. Certain instances seem like they might have some basis in mythology, but surprisingly don't. Rykard's Flaming Skulls feel like they could be based on a genuine yokai, but are also generic. The closest equivalent in Japanese folklore would be the ubagabi, a kind of fiery ghost light that, in some accounts, bears the face of an old woman. Of the clearly new inventions, other skeletal enemies like the bone wheels and balls reveal the good humour which I think is often unfairly overlooked in FromSoft design. The way we interact with or fight skeletal enemies generally has less to do with skeletons as enemies in their own right, but sheds light on how life and death work within the wider lore of the games in question. The lack of Erdtree burial in Elden Ring or the gradual cycle of hollowing in Dark Souls conveniently allow FromSoft both to express the metaphysical setup of the world in practical ways to the player, and also to include enemies that repeatedly regroup and get up. So there you are. Skeletons have a major part to play in the enemy design of FromSoft games, but only a small handful have any particular cultural significance. Nevertheless, this all illustrates how effortlessly FromSoft managed to blend elements from different cultural traditions into games that feel totally cohesive. That's it for this look on skeleton enemies and the wider cultural context behind them. Of course, we still have plenty of other enemy designs to delve into going forwards. I try to keep these videos concise because I hope you find them more enjoyable that way. I don't, for example, think it would be necessary to have given any more background on personifications of death beyond a general context. That said, let me know if there is anything you'd like me to explore in particular detail. As ever, let me close by asking you please to like and subscribe, both to help the channel and to make sure you don't miss out on anything. Naturally, we're going to have a lot of fun with Shadow of the Erdtree content starting very soon, so I can't wait for that. For now though, thank you for watching.